All right, welcome. I don't know how I'm going to cap this off. I feel like I'm in hot water, but I don't know quite how to respond, but I think it's important to talk about regardless. So let's see if I can. What shall I make this be, which is unique? And then we're talking about, right, Hitlerism, right? So I've talked about before. So we're going to make this its own thing. And then somewhere I'm live streaming. Here. Oh, this is where I don't do it. Sorry. Right. So I mean, there's no way to avoid this sort of hot water. Like, for somebody like me, like, what are you going to think? Like, that's not the issue. Like, that's not the main issue. Like, as I've said before, this is a Wonder Twin Powers Activate show. So, like, this is what? This is not designed for you to wind up in one place. Like, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just trying to present you with things that I think are important, interesting, troubling, whatever, like challenging, right? The kinds of challenges that we need to be facing. So that is just my opinion. I understand because, I appear to be, you might think that I'm a white man, right? This is where Noel Ignatiev would ask you, like, what makes you think I'm white, right? But again, like, I've talked with people like on critical theory about this. Like, you can go on Reddit, you can read the receipts, right? I need to be able to pull those up. I guess I could, but like talking to people about, well, I'm not white, and people being like, well, you get to say that you're not white because you're privileged, like to say that I'm not white or you're not black or like, no, you're not white, right? Maybe that's the more political thing for me to do, is not just to make it about my personal identity. Um, but again, that's sort of what I'm trying to do here, which is like I'm trying to de-emphasize, which may be symptomatic or suspicious or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Like, well, it's not about. Anyway, let's get into this because, like, one person who comes up, for example, is Savitri Devi. This is a person who was French, but she converted to Nazism and basically also Hinduism. So if you think about syncretism, right? I in a way advocate syncretism. So like this is an example where people debate today about whether people are fascists, right? People would probably agree that Savitri Devi is a fascist. Of course, what do I have to say about it, right? I'm a nominalist, right? Like, I basically resist labeling things and like acting like I know what something is because there's this label that I slap around, and then I sort of resent the situation where you have to slap a label on somebody. Like, I've been thinking, I think it's something which has been taking over my thinking more and more. I've been sort of allowing it to. I'm just more and more convinced that I'm correct. And it's just like, it's something that I want to harp on. And then it's the kind of thing people are such, it's not even just that people are, judges of hypocrisy, but, it's good to, if you believe in something, you should sort of enact it. And so there's just more and more examples. Like, I was thinking about like talking about capitalism, for example. Like, people would say, like, leftists or the Marxists, like the same way I don't use capitalism. Like, you'll notice I don't spend my time, talking about people who are a problem and like why. Anyway, I'm just talking about everybody else, basically, and in a way making them a problem. But there we go. It's like it's not picking individual fights and individual ideologies, but basically talking about the fact that any ideology, any way of understanding is going to be, what to say? I mean, there's sometimes there's anything wrong with it. It's just that we desperately need them to fit together. And like, to the extent that like you're going to tell me that like, anyway, this is just different. I'm off on a tangent. But like, you're going to tell me that like things are impossible because of like a definition of words, like, or like for example, with Marxism, for example, like I have shown before, like emergency response. So I basically say that war should be responded to as a whole in the form of emergency response, as opposed to really thinking that you are a warrior. Like, there's probably a lot of war theory that considers that you can be at war without an enemy. So there, could be that, but I just consider that basically emergency response, like the situation where you're at war with the situation, basically. And so I see it as that. And so something like, okay, so in terms of being specific about, okay, well, what about the tenets of neo-Nazism, right? Like I've talked before about scapegoating. Like I think that ultimately trying to like single out like a specific group, such as Jewish people, for example, or anybody, and acting like everything is their fault. Like I think that is it's a mistake. In addition to whatever being unfair, to that person, maybe not, or whatever. That's one question. But there's also just in the I don't want to say the empirical sense, like in terms of how things actually work. Like that's not really true. So it typically happens that a scapegoat will be chosen because there's some other like ridiculous pressure or whatever which is being taken out. So it's not even necessarily that people really believe, but it's just that I don't even know. I guess it's a weird thing. It's like a deep level of trauma maybe, which invites a violent response. It's almost, I'm trying to think of, I don't know how to describe it, but hurt people is in a way what I'm talking about. Like people who have been scapegoated will then go on to scapegoat others. Like I think a lot about the connection between the Holocaust, for example, and the Treaty of Versailles. And I mean, obviously, I'm not comparing or something. That's not the point. But these things are connected because the way that I've basically thought about it is that. Imperial Germany was basically treated similarly to how Europeans would treat colonies or other like basically non-Europeans, right? So this whole idea of like, oh, we're the civilized ones, and we're anyway. This was very punitive. It was like you're at fault, and people. There was the whole. It was Asiatic, right? The Germans were de-whiteified. I'm sure. I don't know if that probably happened the other way as well, or at least the idea that the Allies were. In league or dominated by this Jewish scapegoat menace, right? The scapegoating that the Nazis were doing, or sorry, I guess I don't know if that was happening in World War One, but I don't know how. Anyway, the racialization worked out. The point of what I'm trying to say is that there's a way in which like Germany was colonized, also in the debt, right, in the massive reparations debt. But I mean, you can also compare that to the national debt, for example, of the United States right now, or the national debts of a lot of countries. So I'm not, I don't know. I'm just defensive, basically. I'm protective. I believe that there is something to what I'm talking about beyond me talking about things relevant to my heritage or something. It just so happens that being half German and half American means that a lot of the things that I'm talking about in a way reflect on me personally because I'm in a way the heir to these things, right? Like I'm the legacy. Like in terms of like people talk about I saw a sign today where somebody said I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, right? And I thought that was a great shirt. I mean, in a way, I'm thinking about it. It's like a reverse ancestor veneration because we should be like they're in a way our wildest dreams, or like we put them up on a pedestal, but it's like more so like I guess it's but basically what did your ancestors imagine for you? And I guess it's a really funny thing. I've talked about pornography before, but I don't know. I don't know if you're aware, but there those kinds of things exist. Like it's a subversion of expectation, and so there's the eroticization of the difference in between the lives of people in different generations. So just and then what else? So we're talking about back to esoteric neo-Nazism. I mean, there's that. We're just sort of riffing here, talking about basically. What am I trying to say here? Just the underbelly of everything. So, I mean, what I'm trying to think of is there was the SA. In addition to the SS, there was the SA. And I believe that this person, is what I call homosexuality, his homosexuality. So, like, there was a person who was queer, basically, who was in the Nazis and then eventually got cut. But that doesn't mean that there were no queer people left in the Nazis, right? I mean, they may have made, I don't know who would have tried. My personal opinion is that, like, in a way, everybody's queer, right? So I'm not, but see, I'm not big on distinctions, right? Like the difference between queer and straight in terms of, like, I was quoting Galatians 3:28 or something. Anyway, but see, this is sort of what I'm talking about. This gets to, in a way, to the crux of the matter. And it's like, I can't, especially in this episode, like I was just thinking about how my shit crashed again. And I was like, okay, so I brought up esoteric I mean, it's not going to get better for me, right? Like, it's not like I can say, it's not like what I'm saying right now is like putting anything to bed, but at least it's better than just like breaking off after, anyway. But then it's just, but even then it's just like, what am I doing? It's like, is recording this a bad idea? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not about me, right? This is supposed to be about you. So yeah, if you get to see this, like, I just want you to be considering these things. And it's like, these are the sorts of things we all need to be taking responsibility for, in my opinion. Like, thinking through, and like, if you're gonna, I don't know, not just argue, but in terms of market research, like if we're trying to understand, like, we're trying to transcend, right? We're trying to transcend the worst outcomes. So the worst outcomes that we can do are basically to kill each other, to exterminate each other, right? To kill each other by accident because we can't let go of consumerism, right? We can't compromise our way of life. We can't stop scapegoating each other, right? And at the same time, in terms of transcending, things will come back, and that's happening. In a way, it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy because we don't have new words. Like, my opinion in terms of like fascism, socialism, like, I think there's just, my opinion about the form of government is just like, I have basically a description of government in general that I call semio-subitocracy. And I just say that different governments are different kinds of semio-subitocracies. And beyond that, like, it will take more study. Like this is an operational concept that I offer to you. And like, I would be happy to work with other people on this. But as you can tell, like, I have a lot of things going on. So like, I just sort of like sketch out operational concepts. Anyway, and I should be doing more, whatever. But this is just part of my process of showing. And it's still my birthday, except not in my birthplace. My birthplace, it hasn't been my my birthday for a long time. I was born in Henstedt-Ulzburg. Henstedt-Ulzburg. In case you were not aware, I was born in the Paracelsus Clinic. I wonder if it would come up. I guess so. We went back there. I've been back to my birthplace. My mom was there too. So it was the whole thing. So yeah, that's where I was born. Anyway, semio-subitocracy is basically the idea that the way things wind up getting handled has to do with exactly what I'm sort of laying out here. Emergency response concepts of operations. So this is built off of stratocracy, right here. But like, my supposition is not that there's this thing called the military, which is separate from a so-called civilian government, and that the so-called military is like unduly infringing on the civilian part. I'm basically saying that in reality, I would tend more toward the idea that societies are a lot closer on the slider toward total war than people understand. Like, it's over 50% or something. Like, it depends on how you define war. Like, there's a sense in which I think that war doesn't exist. And that's a level at which conflict doesn't exist. And that's when you're getting into things like mysticism, right? like Leela Hinduism. I read a book several years ago and just found another one. I don't know what this person's reputation is, so don't consider this an endorsement or something. I just know that this person, their forgiveness strategy is also based on the idea that, like, before we're born, we all agree to play different roles for each other, right? So, in that sense, there's nothing to forgive because nothing wrong happened. But then, like, this person has apparently worked, with people who have been harmed very badly by other people. But apparently, it works to where they wind up being grateful for everything that happened to them. Obviously, the way I'm framing that, like, in a way, I believe that is important, but I'm so skeptical. Like, because for me, like, the way that I started talking to you about this, it's just like, I mean, look at all this, right? I mean, in terms of the way to put that in grander terms is, right, here we have esoteric neo-Nazism, right? And then we have theodicy, right? So the question is, like, why, if there is a God, right? If there is somebody who, like, controls everything that happens, right? Why did the Holocaust happen? But I mean, we can ask that about a lot of things, but it's related to this question. And as I've been thinking about it recently, obviously we have this, we have the Israel-Palestine conflict. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's so rarely mentioned on the news. You never hear anything about it. Anyway, I'm sorry for being sarcastic about the situation where many people are dying, right? And as many will point out, many are dying on both sides. I'm part of this a group where we show movies, and, like, I don't pick the movies, but the movies that were shown, we showed several that were about Israel Palestine, including one about settlers, and it's so fascinating. I mean, it's so fascinating to look at Israeli religion. Oh my God. I'm going to pretend that this is what I wanted to look for, because that's pretty funny. But I'm just tired and hungry. So anyway. See, here I'm reminding myself of, like, Stephen Colbert, who's, like, during the cancel Colbert phase, he was like, I'm sitting here talking about how I'm not a racist. So that's important to say. Like, I'm not saying that I'm not a racist, right? Like, I'm not saying that I haven't been influenced. That's part of it, right? Of course I have been influenced by, for example, Nazi. Like, my mother was raised by people who were in the Hitler Youth, for example. And then but, like, on the other side, like, my grandmother, I don't know, she was in the Great Depression. Her father died, right? I don't know. It's just like, when she was quite young, I'm trying to think, or I mean, okay, while I'm telling you about all this, I also have, as I mentioned, this American pedigree. I was mentioning the Augustine Warners, right? Like, being on the wrong side was, now I'm even forgetting, right? The axe forgets, right? But let's see. Like, I think it was Junior. Bacon's Rebellion. Like, I would say basically on the wrong side. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I've mentioned legal nihilism on the stream before. So there's a sense in which, like, a government is presumptuous, or, like, people are presumptuous in presenting themselves as a government when, like, they really don't deserve to do that. The problem, of course, is, you can just play. I mean, one of my main points as of all time, though, is that, like, these states are divided against each other. So, like, in terms of the pressure cooker we're facing down, like, okay, so I got to end with a hot take. As I said, I can't put anything to bed, but I'm cooking something right now, and I'm super hungry. So, there's this thing called eliminationism. Eliminationism. Which is basically like you're going to get rid of everybody. A social group is a cancer on the body politics that must be excised, right? So, as I've said before, like this is very similar to the logic of first they came for the trade unionists. So I'm basically saying that, like, it's important to me that, like, in a way, like, that I don't condemn. So, like, do you believe in coincidences? Because I don't believe in coincidences. And so, as I said before on stream, you know, Miss Boucher's birthday, March 17, right? 317. God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. So I'm not sure we need to save the world, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm picking up on is this idea that it's not them, or like judge not lest ye be judged. Okay, so this is basically it. I'm open to this, like, basically a pantheist, entheist idea where it's like, it's not just, I don't know, like we're all each other. I mentioned infinite reincarnation. Like, what if I'm Adolf Hitler in another lifetime? What if I'm in a concentration camp in another lifetime? And I think, what if I'm all of these things? You know, what if I'm going to wind up playing all of these roles? And, you know, how would I feel about that? Say that I got that news for sure. Like, would I feel excited about that? Because I get to experience all the possibilities, like anything I could fantasize, right? Could eventually be a possibility that I would live. But on the other hand, the cost, right? If you want to think about it that way, is that you'd have to experience all the bad things as well. But then the sort of trade-off is, or not the trade-off, but like the thing about the highs and the lows is that they're really shadows on the wall. Like in terms of like whatever the absolute is, like it can't be touched. So like you can't destroy God with nuclear bombs, right? Or like whatever. Like there is no, like if it's just somebody running the simulation, like that's not God. Like I mean like the absolute. Like there is no means by which, you know, the absolute will be oh, it's just so funny. I mean, we'll have to earmark it there because I basically need to introduce you to my idea for cosmology, which is basically that we are going to restart time. We're going to, like the end of time loops back around to the beginning. So I sort of believe in a cyclical looping of time, but like the things that we do, it's sort of like we're driving this along. And in a way, like it is consensual. Like it's like building into this, like this guy's idea of like the roles that we'll play in each other's lives. I think maybe a way to explode the problem is to say, I mean, it's problematic enough maybe to think about, I think, but it may be even more problematic to think about it like on an individual lifetime. Like, why would you choose to have bad things happen to you? But it's like, what if, you know, it's not that you're choosing to live one life at a time. It's like you're choosing to live a lot of lives at the same time. And so, but I don't know. I'm also tempted to believe in sort of an afterlife where, like, I don't know, where everybody's individual experience is also, I don't know if I would say redeemed, but it's a tough thing, you know, because this is again back to like theodicy, right? In terms of like kids with cancer and the Holocaust, right? And like, and even more to the point, like, why are there people who like pick up on this, right? Why are there people who want to kill each other? You know, like that's awful. But as I was saying before, also like about the zone of interest. In this, you know, there's the wall between the house and the concentration camp. And I was thinking about how today, like that wall is the screen. Like that's me. Like that's right here. Right. And the TV, you know, you can turn on the news and you see the rubble, you know, and you see what's happening. Or you read about it on your phone or whatever. Or you look at it in pornography, right? But it's like your access to this fantasy world, which is anyway, the phantasm in the sense of the phantasmal war, right? Oh, I'm losing track of this. My burger is burning or like cooking down to nothing, unfortunately. Oh, basically, like within this, it's not exactly that things like Nazism are a test, but it's basically like the most evil things. I heard basically like there was some nuns who would go and forgive people, and there were people who would go to death row and like do counseling and like forgive the people or like do what is it, confession or whatever for the people who are on death row. And it's like, how could you, offer a murderer forgiveness or something? And I think there was something about like the sin, which is the hardest to forgive. That's the one that's the most important to forgive. But then what does that mean? Right? And what does that mean in the context of like of this, where people are being bombed today, right? But think about how many bombs and guns there are in the world. Like the things that are going on now are horrible. Like people are dying. Like people are killing themselves while I'm talking to you on my birthday. Oh my god, that's so awful to say. But it's like, freaking, like there's 8 billion people or whatever. What's the world population? I wonder if it keeps up. Like, are you gonna tell me? It should like keep up every day. Anyway, like there's so much. That's where you look at. I leave you with this. I'm sorry, I can't absolve. I can't. I'm not here to be trusted. One of my operational concepts is called zero trust protocol. I don't ask you to trust me. I just ask you to. This is files submitted for consideration. So I have Two Suns in the Sunset. One of the lyrics is, he's thinking about the Holocaust to come. So, like the idea, like we can all die in a nuclear war, and it may not be nuclear, but this disruptive technology. And then I basically say that there's no way that you could apply mass murder to a group that is not. You can feel safe. It's not going to be applied to you. Like the safest that you can be is for it to be not normalized, or to find a way to solve problems without using machines to efficiently kill other people, because the ability to kill other people efficiently is growing, and that is a problem because we don't get along. And so it's not just Nazis and anti-Semitism, like that's bad, but just the way that I mean this whole shit where we can't get along, but we also can't be real. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like the Democratic Party or whatever calls for unity or whatever, but like it's just a big issue. Like when we, I don't even know, there's a certain amount of keeping up appearances that you're doing. So it's like, I feel like you can't be unified unless people are being sincere. And so I guess I'm sincerely confused. And with that, signing off.